She whispered just 7 words. He said it only hurts the first time. That was all. No name, no address, just fear. But it was enough for Officer Caleb Monroe and his old German shepherd, Max. What they uncovered behind that snowy door would expose a nationwide crime and rescue nearly 100 children. This isn't just a story about pain, it's about listening when no one else does, and a dog who refused to walk away. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments, and if you believe in justice, in second chances, and that dogs like Max were born for more than loyalty, hit that subscribe button, because this story will stay with you long after it ends. The snow had not stopped falling for 2 days. Cold Hollow, Colorado, tucked high among the skeletal ridges of the San Juan Mountains, was blanketed in white silence. The town's wooden houses, their roofs bowing slightly under the weight of winter, seemed frozen in time. Streetlights flickered amber through the mist as wind howled between empty porches. It was the kind of night that made even memories curl up and sleep. Inside the dimly lit sheriff's station, Officer Caleb Monroe sat hunched over a worn wooden desk. 52, gray-bearded and broad-shouldered, he moved with the quiet steadiness of a man who had once known chaos and no longer needed to chase it. A former Army MP with a military bearing softened only by sorrow, Caleb had returned to Cold Hollow 10 years ago after losing his wife to cancer. Since then, he'd kept his distance from anything that felt too loud or too close. But he never missed a shift, never missed a call. At his feet, resting on a folded fleece blanket, lay Max, a 9-year-old German shepherd with dark amber eyes, a half-collapsed left ear, and a faded scar stretching across his back leg. Once a certified therapy dog for trauma-affected children, Max had been rescued from a shelter in Denver 2 winters ago after the fire that ended his career and nearly his life. Caleb didn't plan to take in a dog that night, but the way Max had stared at him from behind the cage bars, quiet, still, and already loyal, made it impossible to walk away. Caleb had named him Max after a boy. Max Taylor, 8 years old, withdrawn, and mute after watching his father shot in a grocery store. For months, the boy didn't speak. Until one day, Max the dog sat beside him and leaned his body into the child's side. The boy whispered his first word in nearly a year. It was the dog's name. The station was quiet except for the low hum of the heater. Caleb sipped bitter coffee from a metal mug when the phone rang. He blinked once, checked the clock, 12:47 a.m., then reached for the receiver. 911, what's your emergency? A pause. The breath on the other end was so soft he nearly missed it. He said, "It only hurts the first time." The voice was young, a girl, no more than 6 or 7, barely above a whisper, but enough to send every muscle in Caleb's body tensing. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Silence. "Are you safe? Can you tell me where you are?" A faint rustle. Then the line went dead. Caleb didn't hesitate. He turned to his screen, traced the call's coordinates. It had come from a rural property on the edge of town, Hollow Ridge Road. A weather-worn cabin registered to a Lisa Carter, single mother, 1 child. He stood. Max immediately rose with him, his ears perked despite the quiet room. "Let's go, partner," Caleb muttered, grabbing his coat and holster. The drive was slow. Snow caked the windshield despite the wipers. Hollow Ridge was a narrow, tree-lined road that dipped into a small hollow before sloping up toward the Carter cabin. Caleb parked just short of the mailbox and turned off the engine. The headlights died, plunging everything into darkness, save the pale light coming from one of the upstairs windows. He and Max trudged through the snow, boots and paws crunching side by side. Caleb knocked twice. A few seconds passed before the porch light flickered on. The woman who opened the door looked younger than her years. Lisa Carter, 29, shoulder-length brown hair tied back in a rush, wore a heavy hoodie with flower stains on the sleeves. There were dark circles beneath her eyes, and her posture was brittle like someone who hadn't rested in weeks. Her face tensed at the sight of Caleb's badge. "Sorry to bother you this late, ma'am," he said gently. "We received a call from this address, from a child." Lisa blinked, visibly rattled. "A call? There must be some mistake. I've been asleep." "It's just me and my daughter here." Caleb offered a calm nod. "Would you mind if I came in, just to make sure everything's okay?" She hesitated. For a moment, her fingers tightened around the door frame. Then she stepped aside. The cabin was warmer than expected. A gas heater hissed softly in the living room. Toys were scattered near the coffee table. A small Christmas tree sat undecorated in the corner, but what caught Caleb's eye was the blinking red light on the cordless phone dock and the set of keys Lisa hadn't noticed she dropped near the door. "Ella's in bed," Lisa said, voice low. "She hasn't been feeling well. I gave her something to help her sleep." Caleb nodded. Max sniffed the air and walked past the living room toward the hallway. He stopped in front of the last door and sat, ears forward, eyes fixed. Lisa glanced that way nervously. "She's fine, just tired. Would you mind if I checked on her?" Before Lisa could answer, a soft whimper came from behind the closed door. Max growled, a quiet, deep rumble, not at the girl, but at the fear. Caleb moved slowly, placing a hand on the doorknob. "Lisa?" Her arms wrapped around herself. Okay." He opened the door. The room was dark except for a blinking nightlight in the shape of a teddy bear. On the bed, curled up and facing the wall, was a small shape under a threadbare blanket. Her hands were clutching something. Caleb stepped closer. It was a teddy bear with bandages wrapped tightly around its arms. Ella Carter was 6, pale, thin, with soft chestnut curls sticking to her damp forehead. Her small wrists peeked out from the sleeves of a too small pajama top, and they were covered in round, carefully placed adhesive bandages. Max stepped forward and laid down beside her bed, resting his chin on his front paws. Ella turned her head and looked at him. Her eyes were dark, wide, and old. Too old. "His name is Max," Caleb whispered. "He's here to keep you safe." Ella said nothing, but she reached out just barely and touched Max's ear. The next morning, the snow had not let up. Cold Hollow wore its silence like a burial shroud, the town moving slower than usual beneath thick clouds and bitter winds. Officer Caleb Monroe stepped out of his cruiser and into the lot behind Cold Hollow Elementary School, Max walking beside him with his usual calm, alert gait. The school stood in modest bricks and old wood, a low 2-story building with blue shutters and fading murals of forest animals that had seen better winters. The children inside brought flickers of color to the stillness-bright backpacks, little boots clomping against the tiled halls, and voices muffled by coats and worry. Caleb had made the visit unofficial for now. After last night's call and what he saw in Ella's room, he couldn't look away. But accusations were dangerous, and evidence still fragile. He needed to ask, to listen, to observe. Principal Janine Rollins met him at the front desk. A short, wide-hipped woman in her early 50s, she wore a heavy knit sweater and a tight bun of silver-threaded hair. Her eyes, behind gold-rimmed glasses, were sharp and tired, the kind of tired earned through decades of underpaid vigilance. She shook Caleb's hand firmly. "She's not here today," Janine said, guiding him down the hallway. "Hasn't been for nearly a week now. 3rd absence this month." They passed classrooms where teachers sang phonics and students scribbled in notebooks. Caleb noted the normalcy, how easy it was to miss something small when everything else seemed fine. "Her teacher?" Caleb asked. "Room 2B, Ms. Halpern." Ms. Halpern was a lean woman in her early 30s, with freckles across her nose and sleeves perpetually pushed up to her elbows. She had the posture of someone who expected to be interrupted. When she spoke of Ella Carter, her voice lowered instinctively. "She's quiet," she said, handing Caleb a folder of attendance records. "Very bright, but withdrawn. She startles easily, doesn't like being touched. And the bare ginger, she carries it everywhere." "Any signs of injury?" Caleb asked. Halpern hesitated. "Bruises, here and there. I asked once, she said she fell. I filed a note with the counselor, but nothing came of it. It's hard to know when to push, and when pushing will only scare them further." Caleb nodded, understanding the weight of that line. He thanked her, then turned to Max, who had been quietly sniffing near the coat hooks. The dog moved with certainty, his nose brushing the sleeve of a pink winter jacket hanging on the lower hook. He stopped and sat. Caleb stepped closer and carefully lifted the jacket, checking the name tag sewn inside. Ella Carter. The smell hit him faintly. Old blood, masked under fabric softener. Max growled very softly, barely audible. Caleb looked around. "Where's her locker?" he asked. Halpern pointed to a row of cubbies near the windows. Inside Ella's cubby was a canvas tote with her name stitched in thread. Caleb opened it gently. Inside were coloring books, broken crayons, and a rolled-up piece of folded construction paper. He unrolled it on the teacher's desk. It was a drawing bright with marker lines and childlike uneven shapes. A woman with brown hair stood holding the hand of a small girl. Behind them loomed a tall black figure, faceless, drawn in thick black strokes. His hands stretched toward the girl, but stopped short as if blocked by something. Between the figure and the child, drawn in brown and gray, was a dog. The name, Max, was scribbled underneath in block letters. Caleb stared at the image, his chest tightening. She remembered. Somehow, in the short moment they'd met, the dog had become her symbol of safety. "You said the counselor spoke with her?" he asked. Ms. Halpern nodded. Briefly, but Ella didn't say much, wouldn't even draw, just stared. That's when I stopped pressing. Caleb turned to Principal Rollins. "Would you allow me to bring in someone to speak with her, a child trauma specialist, someone I trust?" Janine Rollins studied him, then nodded. "If it helps, yes, but be careful, Caleb. Some stories open slowly, and not everyone wants them heard." That afternoon, Evelyn Hart arrived. Evelyn was a woman of precise movement and deep patience, in her early 40s with cropped chestnut hair and steady, pale green eyes that missed nothing. She wore minimal makeup, her outfit neat and quiet gray cardigan, black jeans, clean boots. She had worked in both foster systems and private clinics, known for coaxing words from children who had none left. Her voice was low and melodic, the kind that made small shoulders relax. "Any contact with her today?" she asked as she stepped out of her Subaru in front of the sheriff's station. "None," Caleb said. "But I saw enough in that house last night, and Max caught the scent again at the school." Evelyn glanced down at the dog. "He remembers. Always does." She followed Caleb inside, reviewing Ella's school drawing and the attendance records. She nodded slowly, already building her silent map. "What about the mother?" she asked. "Lisa Carter, young, worn down. She didn't seem hostile, but she's hiding something." Abused women sometimes protect the abuser. They believe love means survival. Max lay beside Evelyn's chair, his head resting on his paws. "Then we give them another kind of love," she said softly. The next morning, the snow had not let up. Cold Hollow wore its silence like a burial shroud, the town moving slower than usual beneath thick clouds and bitter winds. Officer Caleb Monroe stepped out of his cruiser and into the lot behind Cold Hollow Elementary School, Max walking beside him with his usual calm, alert gait. The school stood in modest bricks and old wood, a low two-story building with blue shutters and fading murals of forest animals that had seen better winters. The children inside brought flickers of color to the stillness, bright backpacks, little boots clomping against the tiled halls, and voices muffled by coats and worry. Caleb had made the visit unofficial for now. After last night's call and what he saw in Ella's room, he couldn't look away. But accusations were dangerous, and evidence still fragile. He needed to ask, to listen, to observe. Principal Janine Rollins met him at the front desk. A short, wide-hipped woman in her early 50s, she wore a heavy-knit sweater and a tight bun of silver-threaded hair. Her eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses were sharp and tired, the kind of tired earned through decades of underpaid vigilance. She shook Caleb's hand firmly. "She's not here today," Janine said, guiding him down the hallway. "Hasn't been for nearly a week now, third absence this month." They passed classrooms where teachers sang phonics and students scribbled in notebooks. Caleb noted the normalcy, how easy it was to miss something small when everything else seemed fine. "Her teacher?" Caleb asked. "Room 2B, Ms. Halpern." Ms. Halpern was a lean woman in her early 30s with freckles across her nose and sleeves perpetually pushed up to her elbows. She had the posture of someone who expected to be interrupted. When she spoke of Ella Carter, her voice lowered instinctively. "She's quiet," she said, handing Caleb a folder of attendance records. "Very bright, but withdrawn. She startles easily, doesn't like being touched. And the bare ginger. She carries it everywhere." "Any signs of injury?" Caleb asked. Halpern hesitated. "Bruises, here and there. I asked once, she said she fell. I filed a note with the counselor, but nothing came of it. It's hard to know when to push, and when pushing will only scare them further." Caleb nodded, understanding the weight of that line. He thanked her, then turned to Max, who had been quietly sniffing near the coat hooks. The dog moved with certainty, his nose brushing the sleeve of a pink winter jacket hanging on the lower hook. He stopped and sat. Caleb stepped closer and carefully lifted the jacket, checking the name tag sewn inside. Ella Carter. The smell hit him faintly old blood, masked under fabric softener. Max growled very softly, barely audible. Caleb looked around. "Where's her locker?" he asked. Halpern pointed to a row of cubbies near the windows. Inside Ella's cubby was a canvas tote with her name stitched in thread. Caleb opened it gently. Inside were coloring books, broken crayons, and a rolled-up piece of folded construction paper. He unrolled it on the teacher's desk. It was a drawing bright with marker lines and childlike uneven shapes. A woman with brown hair stood holding the hand of a small girl. Behind them loomed a tall black figure, faceless, drawn in thick black strokes. His hands stretched toward the girl but stopped short as if blocked by something. Between the figure and the child, drawn in brown and gray, was a dog. The name Max was scribbled underneath in block letters. Caleb stared at the image, his chest tightening. She remembered. Somehow, in the short moment they'd met, the dog had become her symbol of safety. "You said the counselor spoke with her?" he asked. Ms. Halpern nodded. Briefly, but Ella didn't say much. Wouldn't even draw. Just stared. That's when I stopped pressing. Caleb turned to Principal Rollins. "Would you allow me to bring in someone to speak with her? A child trauma specialist. Someone I trust." Janine Rollins studied him, then nodded. "If it helps, yes. But be careful, Caleb. Some stories open slowly, and not everyone wants them heard." That afternoon, Evelyn Hart arrived. Evelyn was a woman of precise movement and deep patience, in her early 40s with cropped chestnut hair and steady, pale green eyes that missed nothing. She wore minimal makeup, her outfit neat and quiet gray cardigan, black jeans, clean boots. She had worked in both foster systems and private clinics, known for coaxing words from children who had none left. Her voice was low and melodic, the kind that made small shoulders relax. "Any contact with her today?" she asked as she stepped out of her Subaru in front of the sheriff's station. "None," Caleb said. "But I saw enough in that house last night, and Max caught the scent again at the school." Evelyn glanced down at the dog. "He remembers. Always does." She followed Caleb inside, reviewing Ella's school drawing and the attendance records. She nodded slowly, already building her silent map. "What about the mother?" she asked. "Lisa Carter, young, worn down. She didn't seem hostile, but she's hiding something. Abused women sometimes protect the abuser. They believe love means survival." Max lay beside Evelyn's chair, his head resting on his paws. "Then we give them another kind of love," she said softly. The next evening, the storm relented just enough to make the roads passable. Pale shafts of moonlight broke through cracks in the clouds, casting a dull shimmer over the snow-slicked fields around Cold Hollow. At the Carter cabin, the heater was finally working again, and though the rooms were still shadowed, the warmth inside seemed less reluctant, more alert. Evelyn Hart sat at the kitchen table with Ella, who remained wrapped in her wool blanket, clutching Ginger like a fragile promise. Across from them, Lisa Carter stirred a lukewarm mug of tea with both hands, as if the act might anchor her guilt. She had agreed, nervously but sincerely, to let Evelyn return for regular visits, and even allowed Caleb to search parts of the house. But she still defended James Walker, her boyfriend of nearly a year, a man she described as kind, attentive, and just trying to help. He arrived unannounced just past 7. James Walker was in his mid-30s, tall and lean, with short, sandy blonde hair and a sculpted jaw that looked better suited for pharmaceutical commercials than mountain cabins. He wore a charcoal wool coat over a thick turtleneck, designer boots too clean for Cold Hollow's dirt roads, and a leather satchel slung over one shoulder. His smile was practiced, polished, and it reached just short of his eyes. "Evening," he said, flashing his teeth at Caleb as he stepped into the living room. "Didn't know we were having guests." Caleb stood slowly. "We're just checking in. Cold Hollow PD had a welfare concern." James chuckled softly, unfazed. "Lisa's told me all about it. Poor Ella. She's been through so much. But I've been helping, haven't I, sweetheart?" He knelt and opened his satchel, revealing a tidy array of sealed glass vials, alcohol wipes, and syringes. Max, sitting beside Caleb, growled low, deep, and steady. His body tensed, eyes narrowed. James looked at the dog with a faint smirk. "He doesn't like strangers," Caleb said. Or maybe he smells something, Evelyn added, stepping in beside Caleb. James stood, calm as ever. I've been treating her with a custom vitamin therapy I developed myself. All natural, immune supportive, works wonders. Caleb raised an eyebrow. You have a license? James didn't blink. Not in the traditional sense. I'm certified in holistic nutrition and alternative therapies. I've helped dozens of children when conventional medicine failed. And what exactly is in those vials? Evelyn asked. A proprietary blend, James replied smoothly. Natural extracts, vitamins, trace minerals, completely safe. In fact, Lisa's seen the improvement herself. Lisa's hands trembled slightly on her mug. She's been less tired lately, she said, though her voice wavered. Max moved toward James, sniffing his satchel again. Then he turned toward the hallway, ears up. He walked slowly until he reached the door to Lisa's bedroom, sat in front of it, and barked once a short, sharp sound that echoed. James's expression flickered. You should keep that animal under control, he said. He's under control, Caleb said, already moving toward the room. Please, Lisa interjected weakly. That's my private... But it was too late. Caleb opened the door and stepped inside. The room was meticulously neat, far more so than the rest of the cabin. A dresser stood against the wall with folded shirts arranged with surgical precision. On top, next to a cologne bottle, was a small black pouch. Caleb opened it. Inside, rubber gloves, empty vials, labels with partially rubbed-off ink, and a metal instrument that looked like a modified injector. In the corner, beside a laundry bin, sat the garbage can. Caleb reached in with gloved hands and pulled out a plastic bag. Inside, used syringes, torn alcohol wipes, and a small bottle with no label. Back in the living room, James had dropped his smile. I hope you understand, Caleb said, holding the bag, that this is now an official investigation. We'll need to test everything in your kit. That's outrageous, James snapped. I've done nothing wrong. Lisa invited me to help. Evelyn spoke softly but firmly. Children don't need unauthorized injections in dark rooms with unknown substances. They need protection. Lisa sank into a chair, silent, her face pale. Caleb glanced at Max, who had returned to his side and was still watching James with unwavering focus. You should leave, Caleb said. We'll be in touch. James hesitated, then grabbed his coat and satchel, turned, and walked out without another word. The door slammed behind him, but the tension in the room remained like smoke. That night, Caleb stayed with Lisa and Ella until well past midnight. He took detailed photographs of the items from the bedroom, bagged them for evidence, and promised to send them to a lab first thing in the morning. Evelyn stayed beside Ella, reading softly from a children's book while Max lay curled at the girl's feet. Lisa didn't say much, but before Caleb left, she placed a worn photo on the kitchen counter. It was Ella, 2 years younger, smiling at a birthday party. No bruises, no blank stares, just joy. I thought I was helping her, Lisa whispered. I really did. Caleb nodded once. It's not too late to do it right. The cabin was quieter than it had ever been. After James had stormed out the previous night, the air seemed different, like a dam had cracked, letting truth begin to trickle through. Lisa Carter had barely slept. She sat on the living room floor in her robe, her back pressed to the cold wall, staring blankly at the window despite the snowfall still thick beyond the glass. Upstairs, Evelyn Hart moved slowly through Ella's bedroom. She had visited many homes like this, quiet houses with too much silence in the walls. This one wasn't the worst, not by far. But something about Ella's stillness haunted her. It wasn't just sadness, it was strategy. A child who had learned to shrink herself, to stay unnoticed. Ella sat cross-legged on her small bed, still in her pajamas, her arms cradling Ginger, her teddy bear wrapped in medical gauze. Max was lying beside her, resting his large head near her hip, his body forming a curved shield against the world. Ella's hand moved absent-mindedly through the fur behind his ears. Evelyn settled on the foot of the bed, her tone casual. That picture you drew at school, she said. The one with the big dark figure. That was very brave. Ella didn't answer. You put Max in there, Evelyn added, between you and that scary shape. Ella glanced at her, just a flick of her eyes. Then she looked down at Max again. He doesn't let the dark touch me, she whispered. Evelyn smiled softly. Can I tell you a secret? Max has helped a lot of kids. You're not the only one. Ella nodded. I know. He smells like safe places. Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out a small notepad and a pencil. Would you draw something else for me? Ella looked unsure at first. Then she slowly nodded and took the pencil. Downstairs, Caleb was on the phone with the Cold Hollow judge's office, explaining the situation in careful, clipped words. On the kitchen counter were 3 sealed evidence bags, one with the unlabeled vials, one with the injector device, and one with the contents from James's satchel. Caleb had also collected fingerprints from the syringe caps, ready to submit them with the emergency warrant. By noon, the search warrant came through. The grounds were now officially part of an open investigation. He returned upstairs and met Evelyn at the landing. She's opening up, Evelyn said, bit by bit. I think we can learn more. Inside the room, Ella had finished a new drawing. This one showed a house with crooked lines, a woman standing in the window, and a little girl kneeling beside a large dog. The sun above them was cut in half yellow and half black. Between them and the window stood a man tall, all black again, but now with a needle in his hand. Ella, Caleb said gently, kneeling down, can I ask you a question? She looked up. Did James give you the shots? She nodded once. Did your mom see him do it? Another nod, then a pause. She looked away, Ella said quietly. Evelyn placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder and motioned toward the nightstand. The nightlight was shaped like a crescent moon, soft plastic with faint scratches near the top. May I look at this? Evelyn asked. Ella gave a small nod. Caleb unplugged it, turning it over in his hands. A tiny seam ran across the base too small for a battery compartment. It didn't open like a toy. It clicked. Inside, hidden behind a false bottom, was a tiny lens. Camera, Caleb muttered. He's been recording her. Evelyn paled. Probably monitoring the reactions, gauging side effects, maybe worse. They searched the room more thoroughly now, methodically. Behind Ella's dresser, inside the closet, beneath the floorboards near the heat vent, they found 2 more items, a flash drive tucked into the back panel of a drawer, and a small envelope filled with labeled stickers, likely used to forge medication branding. Downstairs, Lisa was now pacing. She flinched when Caleb handed her the dismantled nightlight. What is this? She asked. Caleb didn't answer. He let her figure it out. When Lisa saw the tiny lens and the USB port, she sat down hard. I didn't know, she breathed. I thought he said it was just a nightlight. Ella said you saw him give her the shots, Caleb said. Lisa looked stricken. I didn't watch. I turned away. He said she'd scream less if I didn't look. You believed him? I was desperate, Lisa whispered. We couldn't afford specialists. She kept getting sick. He seemed helpful, kind. He brought groceries, paid for the heater last winter. Caleb set the evidence bags down between them. These are the choices you made, Lisa, but now you have to decide what comes next. Lisa looked at the drawing Caleb placed beside the bags. Ella's picture, the figure with the needle, the dog shielding her. Tears formed slowly in her eyes. I want to help her. I want to fix this. Then we need you to tell us everything, Evelyn said, from the beginning. The cold wind whipped through the trees as Caleb's cruiser tore down the icy roads leading out of Hollow Ridge, the red and blue lights flickering through the snow-choked night. In the back seat, bundled in a thick quilt Evelyn had wrapped around her, Ella Carter lay slumped against the door, her face pale and soaked with sweat. Her breath came in shallow rasps, eyes half closed. Ginger, her teddy bear, was still clutched in her arms, his gauze bandages already damp. Lisa sat beside her daughter, one hand on Ella's back, her other hand trembling uncontrollably on her lap. Next to Caleb, Max sat alert in the passenger seat, eyes flickering constantly toward the rearview mirror. The tension in the vehicle wasn't loud, but it was crushing. Cold Hollow Regional Hospital was a modest facility, 2 floors, 1 ER, and a rotating staff of 6 nurses and 3 attending physicians. The building was squat and boxy, set into a clearing with a parking lot that doubled as a snowplow depot in winter. A flickering blue sign with chipped white letters read, Cold Hollow Health, Community First. The warmth inside was sparse and overly sanitized, but it beat the night outside. Dr. Lena Ashcroft was on duty. In her mid-40s, with long blonde hair tied into a low braid and sharp, almond-shaped eyes behind clear-rimmed glasses. She carried herself with calm precision. Years of working rural triage had made her quick, direct, and fiercely protective of children. She wore navy scrubs and a white coat with a faded patch on the sleeve, her sneakers worn and practical. The moment Ella was wheeled through the emergency doors, Dr. Ashcroft was already issuing orders. Get her to 2A, start IV fluids, slow push, full CBC and tox panel, oxygen mask, low flow, and get a thermal blanket now. Lisa hovered beside the gurney until Dr. Ashcroft gently blocked her path. Ma'am, we've got her now. Please wait in the family room. But she'll be okay, Dr. Ashcroft said, her tone softening. Let us help her. Lisa stood frozen as the doors swung shut. Caleb placed a hand on her shoulder and guided her toward the small waiting area where Evelyn was already seated, flipping through Ella's intake records. Max stayed by the ER doors, unwilling to move. Hours passed. The storm outside thickened, winds battering the windows with wet snow. Inside, time crawled. Lisa sat slouched in a chair, still wrapped in her coat, hands gripping the edge of her seat. Caleb paced the hallway. Evelyn made phone calls to social services, to the lab in Denver analyzing the vials, to the state medical board. Max lay by the radiator, head resting on his front paws, eyes unblinking. At 3:12 a.m., Dr. Ashcroft emerged from the ward, wiping her hands on a folded towel. She's stable, she said. Her vitals are responding. The fever is down. But she's weak, very weak. Lisa stood, her voice cracking. What happened to her? Dr. Ashcroft sighed and took a seat across from them. We ran her labs. White blood cell count is depleted. There are signs of liver strain. The tox panel came back with traces of immunosuppressant synthetic ones, likely administered in small doses over time. The effect would be cumulative. Reduced immune defense, fatigue, possible neurological symptoms. The fact that she's alive is a testament to her age and resilience. Lisa covered her mouth, her knees buckling. Evelyn steadied her. Was it lethal? Caleb asked. Eventually, yes, the doctor said, especially if the dosage increased. Whoever did this had no understanding of pediatric thresholds or didn't care. Caleb's jaw tightened. What's the recovery timeline? She needs monitoring. We'll keep her here at least 3 days. No visitors beyond you 3 and staff. If the fever holds and organ markers improve, she'll be okay. But long-term, we'll need follow-up. Psychological care, nutritional support, and time. Lisa finally broke. Her body crumpled into the chair beside Max, hands covering her face. The sobs came silently at first, then deeper, racking her frame. Max sat up and pressed against her side, resting his head on her lap. She didn't push him away. I didn't know, she whispered through tears. I didn't know what he was giving her. I should have known. No one's asking you to be perfect, Evelyn said quietly. Only honest. Later, just before sunrise, Caleb was granted permission to sit briefly by Ella's bed. Room 2A was dimly lit, the only sound the slow beeping of monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen. Ella looked small beneath the hospital blankets, her skin still too pale, her breathing shallow but steadier. Her eyes fluttered, caught somewhere between sleep and memory. Max padded silently into the room and rested his head gently on the mattress. When Ella sensed the pressure, she stirred and turned her head. Her voice was a breath. Max. He let out a soft whine and nuzzled her fingers. Don't let him back, she mumbled. Please. Caleb, sitting beside the bed, leaned in. He won't, sweetheart, I promise. The morning sun struggled to pierce through the dense gray clouds hanging low over Cold Hollow. Snow dusted the hospital's rooftop like powdered sugar, and the branches of pine trees outside swayed under the weight of ice and wind. Inside room 2A, the air was still. Ella slept, her tiny chest rising slowly, her grip still clinging weakly to Ginger the bear. Max remained curled beside her bed, his eyes open and alert, ears twitching at every hallway sound. Caleb stood by the window, his breath fogging the glass as he watched the parking lot below. A knock on the door broke the silence. It was Evelyn Hart, wrapped in her deep navy coat, clipboard in hand. Her usually composed features were taut. We have a problem, she said simply. Caleb didn't ask. He followed her down the hallway, Max close behind. In the waiting room, Lisa sat with a paper cup of untouched coffee, pale and jumpy. Evelyn motioned for her to stay seated. "James Walker is gone," Evelyn said. "Disappeared sometime between 3 and 5 a.m. His truck's not at the cabin. Neighbor said he saw him hauling black garbage bags into the woods behind the property late last night." Caleb's mouth tightened. "He knew the walls were closing in." Evelyn nodded grimly. "We've got surveillance from the cabin time-stamped. There's more than just Ella on it." They entered a small conference room down the hall. Inside, a technician from the county digital forensics team, Marcus Lee, was working from a portable setup. Marcus was in his late 20s, wiry and intense, with thick glasses and a half-grown beard. He greeted Caleb with a tired nod. Marcus tapped a few keys and brought up the video feed. Grainy black and white footage from Ella's bedroom camera flickered on screen. James, in his usual faded flannel and denim jeans, appeared again and again, leaning over Ella, injecting something into her arm, whispering things they couldn't hear, but it didn't stop with her. "He installed the same setup in at least 3 other rooms," Marcus explained. "Footage spans several weeks. Other children, same pattern. Some are older. One appears to be a boy around 9 or 10. Lisa turned away from the screen, shaking. Evelyn was already making calls to the DA, to CPS, to the state attorney's office. "We need every shred of this documented," she said. "Chain of custody, transcripts, facial recognition if possible. This isn't just one case, this is systemic." Caleb, meanwhile, had one instinct pulling him in another direction. He turned to Lisa. "When was the last time James mentioned anything about other families?" Lisa hesitated. He said he helped people no one else would. The doctors wrote them off. He used to show me emails. Said he'd worked with more than 70 families. Called them his quiet blessings. Said he kept track. Somewhere safe." "Where?" Caleb asked gently. Lisa shook her head. "He never told me." Back at the Carter cabin, snow had partially buried the front steps, and icicles hung like daggers from the gutters. Caleb moved carefully across the side yard where Max was already sniffing furiously around a half-toppled woodpile. The wind kicked up flakes as Max suddenly barked once and began to dig. Caleb crouched down, brushing away snow until he hit wood. It was an old weatherproof crate, half-rotted but still sealed. Inside were vials, at least a dozen some labeled in faded marker, others unmarked entirely. Alongside the vials was a sealed Ziploc bag with syringes, a small journal, and something that looked like a spice container. But inside the canister wasn't seasoning. It was a hidden USB stick buried in powder. Back at the station, Marcus quickly decrypted the drive. It was a contact list: names, addresses, notes on dosage tolerance, and file folders labeled with children's first names, over 70. "I think he's been documenting everything," Marcus said. "This isn't just about control. He wanted to prove he was right." Lisa sat frozen in her chair, hands in her lap. "He always talked about proving people wrong, about saving kids from their own biology. I thought he was just poetic, misunderstood." "Lisa," Evelyn said gently, "would you be willing to testify?" Lisa looked up slowly, her face pale but resolute. "He used me. He hurt my child. If standing up helps even one other family, then yes." Caleb stood. "Then we move now." It began not with sirens or headlines, but with a paw print in the snow and amber eyes that never looked away. The name Max, once just a label on an old vet file, now rippled across 5 states and 2 foreign consulates, carried in whispers through halls of government and courtrooms, in tearful testimonies and sterile hospital reports. And always, behind each page and voice, stood the dog who never barked unless it mattered. After the cabin evidence was processed, Evelyn worked with federal agents to widen the scope of the case. James Walker, once a nameless drifter with a disarming smile and self-proclaimed herbal knowledge, had left behind a path of eerie consistency: children from low-income families, unregistered vitamin therapy, and data caches hidden in the strangest places, inside stuffed animals, beneath floorboards, and once, bizarrely, in a hollowed-out dictionary. The USB Max had led them to crack the case wide open. It included not only names and schedules, but footage, client notes, shipping receipts to a pharmaceutical address in Mexico, and audio logs. One of them ended with James muttering, "They never listen until it's too late, but they'll see I was right." What began as a regional child protection case became an international trafficking investigation. The list of victims grew: 79, then 89, and eventually 97. Each child carried different scars, some visible, others buried in silence. In the weeks that followed, Caleb found himself in a blur of courtroom prep, field briefings, and testimony coordination. Lisa now visibly changed her posture straighter, her gaze no longer evasive, attended every session with a battered notebook in hand. Her testimony, once feared as unreliable due to emotional instability, became one of the most compelling. She described James's manipulation with raw clarity. The defense tried to paint her as a desperate single mother, but Lisa met every insinuation with calm strength. Ella, meanwhile, was recovering at the Cold Hollow Pediatric Therapy Center. The facility was a converted farmhouse on the edge of town, nestled in a grove of birch trees. Inside, therapists worked with muted colors, soft toys, and routines that felt more like gentle play than treatment. Ella's favorite was a young woman named Teresa, who had once been a trauma survivor herself. Teresa was petite, biracial, with bright green eyes and short curly hair dyed soft lavender at the ends. She didn't speak to Ella like a patient, but like a fellow keeper of hard stories. Max accompanied Caleb to the center almost daily. The German Shepherd, now officially listed in federal records as a therapeutic and investigative canine, still walked with that same slow, deliberate gait. His fur was darker now from consistent grooming and medical care, and his old scar had been treated with ointment, though it remained visible under certain light. Children adored him. Some cried just touching his ears, whispering things their mouths hadn't dared before. It was Evelyn who nominated Max for the Public Service Recognition Commendation from the Department of Health. Caleb hadn't even known it was a thing for dogs. The award ceremony took place on the grounds of Cold Hollows Community Park, a wide expanse of half-melted snow with soft, crunching paths carved by volunteers. Rows of white folding chairs dotted the lawn, with a small makeshift stage at the front. Journalists lined the rear, but it wasn't a press frenzy. It felt reverent. On stage, a silver-haired woman from the department, Secretary Joan Harrow, handed Caleb a polished plaque and a navy blue collar medallion engraved with Max's name and service dates. "We honor courage in all its forms," she said into the mic, her voice strong despite her age. "But today, we honor a guardian who never asked to be one and never stepped away when he became one." Max didn't pose for the camera. He sat calmly, eyes not on the crowd, but on Ella dressed in a soft lilac dress with silver shoes, clutching Caleb's jacket hem like a talisman. When the crowd clapped, Max's ears twitched once, but his gaze never moved. In the corner of the park, a boy with dark curly hair and oversized gloves waved shyly. His name was Jeremiah, age 8, from Albuquerque, rescued just days before James was captured trying to cross the border into Mexico. Max had found the backroom crawl space where he was hidden, just minutes before a building raid. Caleb noticed the wave. So did Max. The dog's head tilted, and his tail wagged once. Just once. Lisa watched it all unfold from the third row. She hadn't cried during her testimony. Not when Ella was taken away. Not even when James was sentenced. But as the snow began to fall again, soft, lazy flakes catching in Max's fur, she wept quietly, her fingers laced tightly in her lap. Evelyn stood at the back, hands in her coat, surveying the scene. She didn't smile often, but when she saw Max nudge Ella's hand gently, like he was reminding her that he was still there, she allowed herself one. After the event, when most guests had left and only a few volunteers were dismantling chairs, Caleb lingered near the stage with Ella sitting on his shoulders, her laughter ringing out in the cold air. "Do you think Max knows he's a hero?" Teresa asked, approaching with a thermos of hot chocolate. Caleb looked down at the dog, who now laid quietly at their feet. "I think he knows something bad ended. That's enough for him." As the sun dipped, snow and golden light blanketed the park. The storm that had once swallowed their lives now lay broken at their feet, softened by time, by truth, by a dog that simply didn't look away. Sometimes the loudest cries come in silence, and the greatest heroes walk on four legs, not asking for medals, but simply to be near the ones who need them. Max reminded us that love doesn't always need words to heal, and that faith, even if flickering, can find its way through the darkest storms. When systems failed and adults looked away, it was a child's whisper, a dog's loyalty, and a few hearts brave enough to care that lit the way out. This story is not just about Ella. It's about all the children hiding in plain sight, all the wounds we pretend not to see, and the quiet miracles that show up when we finally open our eyes. Some call it fate, others call it chance. But maybe, just maybe, it was a touch from God Himself, working through pause, people, and second chances. If you believe that miracles still happen, that no one is ever too small to be saved, and that sometimes God sends angels in fur instead of wings, then share this story. Someone out there might need to see it today. Leave a comment below, subscribe for more true stories of hope, and if you feel it in your heart, type Amen in the comments. Let's lift a prayer together for the children still waiting, for the dogs still searching, and for all of us learning to listen better. Comment Amen if you believe God still moves through love and loyalty.